The year is 1998. You're up watching TV. It's late. You should probably head to bed soon. But just as you're about to get up, a commercial catches your attention. A really smart-looking lad comes on. He says, "You've been thinking about losing weight. You've tried the gym and all kinds of diets, but nothing seems to work for you. He just called you out. New breakthrough product for weight loss." He says, "You don't have to change your diet at all." Oh, another smart-looking guy. Looks like he invented the thing. Whoa, would you look at that? The fat absorb powder just soaked up the fat. He says, "That is now bound up fat and it cannot be digested. It's like you never ate it." Well, it would be nice to get rid of this belly fat. What's there to lose?
1, 3, don't stop.
I forget it.
Do not stop.
They show that this problem here in America is the worst in the world.
On a strict regimen of exercise and diet.
Low-fat diet.
But we can't say who or when or why.
Hello. Welcome to No Lab Coat Required. My name is Johnny Cole Dixon. America is the fattest developed nation, and it's not even much of a competition, but that's not why I brought you here. You see, we believed a bit of a lie here in the US. What's the first thing you think of when you think of losing weight? Maybe cardio, maybe cutting calories. Well, how do you figure the weight got there in the first place? Most of us believe that we've couch potatoed our way to fatness, and our intuitive knee-jerk reaction is to go running the pounds off. But slow down for a sec. I recently compiled over 15 randomized controlled trials, the gold standard research for exercise studies, where methods included walking, strength training, high-intensity interval training, and cardio, and next to zero weight was lost in any of these studies without a dietary intervention. I made a whole video on it. You can watch it after this. It would be the season 8 contestants of America's hit show, The Biggest Loser, where contestants perform the infamous weight loss double, eat a whole lot less and exercise a whole lot more. The contestants will go on to lose an average of about 128 pounds. Researchers followed up with these contestants after 6 years and re-examined their weight. They found the participants had regained 90 pounds. That's 70% of their initial loss coming right back. And you may go, "Oh, they just didn't have the willpower to keep it up." Who are you to say that? Your mom ain't got the willpower to keep it up. Sorry, I hope your mom's doing fine. But check this out. These researchers went to go study childhood obesity and blood-lipid relationship. They found that most obese adults were likely obese since they were kids. From the over 2,500 participants analyzed, 77% of the overweight kiddos entered or remained obese going into adulthood. Why do we orbit around a certain weight? Like, is this predestined at birth? Why and how has our nation become permanently fat? Okay, have you been in the news lately? It's a cesspool. One of the worst things about the news is that you have to put up with outlets influencing your thoughts depending on how they frame a story. For example, check out the differences in tone for the reporting of the same story, from the left, the right, and the center. The app I'm looking at is called Ground News. They're partnering with us here at No Lab Coat Required. They aren't the news, they're a news conglomerate. So lately, the moment news comes across me, I swiftly open up Ground News to get a bird's eye view of what's going on. I'm able to verify the political leaning of news publishers, monitor their factuality, and even know who owns the dang thing. Independent thought is becoming increasingly more valuable by the day, which is why I decided to break free of being force-fed the news and instead choosing and taking control over what I want to see. You can select and tailor news based on your interests. You can even monitor your own political leaning statistics. Every man has a bias and there's no way to completely terminate it, but there is a poor way to substantiate it, and that's with a messy algorithm. Escape the sensationalism and the news capture. Get yourself a subscription to Ground News. With my unique link below, you can receive 40% off their Advantage plan. That's 40%. Be free of news capture. Go get yourself some Ground News. Thank you, Ground News, for being a partner of No Lab Coat Required. The 1960s were pivotal in influencing American diet culture. Ansel Keys, who we highlighted in this video, was Mr. Low-Fat himself. He set the game ablaze, dropping research bombs concluding that fat was the devil. He became such a prominent voice, he ended up on the cover of Time magazine, widespreading the ideals of low-fatism. They shunned fat and went as far as to insult obese folk. It's funny though, because obese folk were actually catching strays at the time, as Ansel and his crew crew were actually targeting saturated fat as it was believed to clog the arteries. But here's what many don't know. Low-fatism spawned from Ansel Keys' camp, but the idea actually evolved into something outside of just clogged arteries and cardiovascular disease, right? Into obesity. It would actually be 1977 when fat became a matter of national urgency. It was the release of the dietary goals in the United States, right out of the US Senate. I took a look at this thing and it slapped me in the face. Bread consumption has been declining here in the US, perhaps partially because bread has been viewed as fattening. That's incorrect. Bread is of intermediate caloric density and a good protein source. Mind you, this was the what I'm gonna call postmodern bread era. So this was when we're creating Frankenbread by stripping it of its nutritive and fibrous components and just making it out of sugar-acting flour and riddling it with dough conditioners. In case you didn't know, the bread here in America is mainlining sugar into our bloodstream and fattening us up like a concentrated animal feeding operation. The guidelines will go on to point out fat is the most concentrated source of food energy. It's 9 calories per gram compared to protein and carbs is 4. Therefore, unless you're performing heavy physical activity, you may struggle to control your weight. And right there, just like that, the government began to reinforce the energy balance model, which is the technical term propagating the infamous weight loss duo: exercise more, eat less. It assumes the human body is a simple equation of energy in and energy out. Fat tends to just linger on the average American. Where do we get this invincible fat from? So there was a radical shift in our food supply that went virtually unnoticed. The story starts here, the food pyramid of 1992. The government visualizes a proper diet and tells the people to follow it. These guidelines were not just low on fat, like barely eat it was the advice given to the nation.
If you're watching Fat and Cholesterol, here's some good advice.
And so 1992, Carbohydrates dropped the hardest album of the century. Junk foods like these low-fat Pop-Tarts would feature the pyramid straight up on the box. Bread, pasta, cereal, carbohydrates taking over from the 99 to the 2000s. So it's pretty common to just avoid fat and assume you're doing well by canceling it out of your diet. But when you look at the numbers, no one eats more fat than the folks of the USA. You see, the US never really got rid of fat. It just took up a different shape, literally. The year was 1986. Dietary fat was still framed as a hot culprit behind our most popular diseases. It would be type 2 diabetes getting the attention in this case. Leonard H. Storling, a researcher from the Down Under, who would provide a high-fat diet to a bunch of lab rats. He and his colleagues would find that after 4 weeks of high-fat feeding, muscle and fat tissue became insulin resistant in his rats. Now these were fairly routine findings at the time, but then Storling would receive word on a paper that came out before his that would completely shift his perspective. It was back in 1970, at the height of the cholesterol causes heart disease theory, when 3 researchers out of Denmark would make an expedition out to Greenland. Animal fat was said to have raised serum cholesterol. It had been rumored that the Greenlandic Inuit people were experiencing virtually 0 heart disease, but they were known as the most exquisitely carnivorous people on Earth, as they were consuming diets extremely rich in animal fat. So what's up? The researchers landed on the cold west coast shore of Greenland, organized 130 male and female indigenous people, and got busy with the blood drawing. The participants had strikingly low levels of plasma cholesterol for being a collection of people that only eat meat and fish. This paper had come across Storling's desk lightly shortly after he published his study on the lab rats. But it wasn't the low meat and no heart disease finding that struck him, but it was the fact that these Greenlandic indigenous folk had absolutely 0 sign of diabetes, not 1 case. Huh? He fed his rats high fat and they got insulin resistance. And rats' metabolism closely mimics that of the human, and every other high fat feeding study are getting these diabetic results. This is supposed to be scientific consensus. What gives? Sugar itself is not what makes us fat. It's insulin's response to our haphazard intake of sugar that makes us fat. Johnny, you're in the weeds here. Why are we talking about insulin? Without insulin, there is no fat. Insulin is in charge of holding the door open to usher in storage in those fat cells. So weight management has always been a story of insulin management. So, determined, Sterling would run his study back. He'd go on to feed his rats high-fat diets, but this time he'd make for an important distinction. He'd give one group of rats safflower oil. Another group of rats would get the same safflower oil, but only so much. The researchers replaced a percentage of their fat intake with tuna oil. What he found was nothing short of groundbreaking. The pure safflower oil rats reduced whole body insulin sensitivity by 52%, while the tuna oil group showed no loss of insulin sensitivity. The muscle became more sensitive to insulin. The liver seen improvements. And check this out. Insulin stopped storing fat in fat tissue. You freaking Rika. Sterling was inspired by these results. There was one big uncertainty. Sterling would go on to write, the mechanisms of the fish oils on insulin are unclear. And so I had to take a look at modern day research and ask 3 important questions. First off, what's the difference between the safflower and the tuna oil that his rats got? Why did one group develop insulin resistance and the other didn't? And if we can figure that out, we'd have to ask, does this translate to humans? So America now runs on seed oils, the primary contributors of polyunsaturated fat in the modern food chain. Seed oils are fluid at room temperature, used in virtually every restaurant from fast food to fine dining and everything in between. It's in every packaged food. You have a 95% chance of consuming seed oils if you're eating foods you yourself have not prepared. Fat is unique from protein and carbs in the fact that it's the only macronutrient that goes into the blood the same way it entered the mouth.
For example?
The same raw material used in the olive oil is the same raw material composing the literal walls of our cells. These are called fatty acids, and they show up here 1-to-1 to how they show up here, with one caveat I'll share in a bit. And if you're interested in gaining more confidence in understanding how different fats and oils are composed, what makes them healthy or unhealthy, and so on, add this video to your watch later playlist. There's 2 essential fatty acids that the body cannot make by itself: omega-6 and omega-3 fats. We have to pause the video here because we have to understand the gravity of omega-3 and omega-6 fats. When the body gets a hold of these fats, they're incorporated into that cell membrane that we just talked about, and they have the power to completely shift our physiology into our favor or toward our detriment. We're not talking about sedentariness. We're not talking about couch potatoing our way into fatness or carbohydrates, right? We're talking about the literal balance between omega-3 and omega-6, the molecules that make up our cell wall, having the power to keep us fat. Omega-3 and omega-6 directly oppose each other, direct competition, and only one can occupy the space that's designated on a cell's membrane. It's just like parking. Just like it's one car or the other, it's one omega fat or the other. Once a space is filled, it's filled. These 2 fats also oppose each other's properties. Generally speaking, one mediates inflammation, omega-6, and the other anti-inflammation, that's omega-3. But this video is not about inflammation. We got more than inflammation at stake. We're talking about something that we got a way more worrisome risk of running into. We're talking about the loviest of all love handles. Okay, so it's untamed insulin that has rendered America obese. So why are we looking at this cell wall? What impact on insulin does the balance of omega-3 and omega-6 have? Our muscle and fat have a little receptor that insulin works with. It's called GLUT4. GLUT being shorthand for glucose transporter because, ding ding ding, it transports glucose to the inside of the cell. GLUT4 acts just like a hotel bellhop. Bellhops bring your luggage in, GLUT4 brings your glucose in, from the bloodstream to the cell. Okay, don't get lost in the sauce here, I know we're micro. When you eat your next meal, digestion is all about bringing things into the blood. But that's just the first stop. After that, it's about getting nutrients into the actual cells. And that's what we're talking about here, going from the blood into the cells. GLUT4 is the primary gateway for glucose to enter the cell. So if GLUT4 is impaired, we run into problems. Glucose will jam up in the blood, hiking up our blood sugar levels. Just like if the bellhop gets sick, then the luggage starts to jam up at the door. If glucose jams up, more insulin is secreted. Hyperinsulinemia, high serum amounts of insulin, a key diagnostic factor for type 2 diabetes. So how do we get this insulin level down? Well, here's where GLUT4 and the bellhop differ. Bellhops are always waiting near the door, responding the moment luggage arrives. GLUT4 is waiting and responding the moment insulin arrives, but GLUT4 isn't waiting by the door. It's deep in the cell. So we eat a meal. Insulin is secreted, it pulls up to the cell. GLUT4 responds by traveling to the membrane, fusing with it, and allowing glucose to channel in. Omega-3 fatty acids speed up the travel time of GLUT4 from storage to membrane. It allows for a more reliable cell wall fusion. And get this, we've been looking at just one GLUT4, but omega-3 fatty acids also increase the amount of GLUT4 being produced. With faster, more capable, and just more GLUT4s, we're able to respond to insulin much more efficiently, meaning we're directly increasing insulin sensitivity. And this explains why Storlien got the results that he got with one group of his rats developing insulin resistance, because they were consuming safflower oil, which boasts an almighty 0% omega-3. And watch out for safflower oil. It's definitely making its way into some of the packaged foods that we consume. The other group of rats who didn't see a change were able to get away scot-free because they were getting a percentage of omega-3 in their tuna oil. And that shift right there, that balance between omega-3 and omega-6 made all the difference. What we just broke down is just one effect of 12 mechanisms that this paper counted, and there are probably a dozen more. It's not that the energy balance is wrong. In fact, it's some of the most sound science out. However, it originated to determine the energy of steam engines. We later then adapted it to measure the human body. It's hand-me-down science, and it tends to negate the more important conversation of how food communicates to the body. Okay, do not go running off spending your money on omega-3 supplements just yet. As we mentioned earlier, omega-3 and omega-6 express opposite effects. If omega-3 is inherently and naturally anti-diabetic, then what do we think omega-6 is doing? It's encouraging fat storage and putting a lock on that joint. We can supplement omega-3 all we want. I mean, you could just be popping the fish oil, be walking around with the fish oil breath, bothering everybody. But until we start to disrupt the dominance of omega-6 in our diets, we won't get a return on investment. Fat Absorb made several crappy, uneducated assumptions. One being that fat makes you fat. Nah, man, obesity is a multifactorial condition. And it turns out, as we've seen, that paying attention to fat, right? Fat, dietary fat, is one of the most important nutrients that you can focus on. I hope you guys gained some insight and perspective out of this one. I'm gonna get about y'all way.